In a small, remote village surrounded by rolling hills and vast savannas, there lived a young girl named Uloko. She was a bright and cheerful child, known for her sparkling eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest day. However, Uloko's life took a tragic turn when her parents died in a terrible accident while crossing the river. The entire village mourned, but none felt the loss as deeply as Uloko. Left with no one to care for her, Uloko was taken in by her two uncles, Obika and Dwoka. They were her father's brothers, but unlike him, they were cold and unkind. Uloko's life, once filled with laughter and love, was now one of hardship and sorrow. Uloko's new home was nothing like the one she had known. Her uncle's house was small and bare, with only the most basic necessities. The walls were cracked, and the roof leaked when it rained. Her uncles made her sleep on a thin mat in the corner of the room, away from the warmth of the fire. From the moment she arrived, Uloko was put to work. Fetch water from the river. Obika would bark. Sweep the floor. Dwoka would command. Day after day, Uloko toiled from sunrise to sunset, with little rest and even less kindness. Despite the harsh treatment, Uloko remained strong. She missed her parents terribly, but she held on to the hope that things would get better one day. In the quiet moments when she was alone, she would close her eyes and imagine a different life, one where she was free to play and learn like the other children in the village. One evening, as Uloko sat by the river after finishing her chores, she watched the village children laughing and playing in the water. Her heart ached with longing. She wished she could join them, but her uncles would never allow it. "I wish I could go to school like the other children," Uloko whispered to herself as she dipped her toes in the cool water. "I want to learn to read and write. I want to become a teacher and help others." But deep down, Uloko knew that her uncles had different plans for her. They saw her as nothing more than a burden, someone to work for them and bring in some money. The thought of escaping their control seemed like an impossible dream. As the sun began to set, Uloko slowly made her way back to her uncle's house, her heart heavy with the weight of her unfulfilled dreams. One day, a man named Chief Okagbu visited the village. He was a wealthy and powerful man, known for his large herds of cattle and his many wives. But Chief Okagbu was no longer a young man, his hair was grey, and his face was lined with age. As he walked through the village, his eyes fell upon Uloko, who was busy sweeping the dirt outside her uncle's house. "Who is that girl?" Chief Okagbu asked one of the villagers. "She is Uloko, the orphan niece of Obayako and Dwoka," the villager replied. Chief Okagbu nodded thoughtfully. "She is young and strong. I think she would make a good wife," he said, a smile spreading across his face. The villager looked at him in surprise. "But she is just a child, and you are old enough to be her father." Chief Okagbu waved his hand dismissively. "That does not matter. I have the wealth to take care of her, and her uncles will be happy to have one less mouth to feed." Later that day, Chief Okagbu went to Oloko's uncles and made his proposal. "I wish to marry your niece, Uloko," he said confidently. "In return, I will give you 10 cows and a piece of land." Obayako and Dwoka exchanged glances. The offer was tempting. 10 cows and land would make them rich men in the village. Without a second thought, they agreed. That evening, Oloko's uncles called her into the house. Their faces were serious as they delivered the news. "Uloko, you are to marry Chief Okagbu," Obayako said bluntly. Amina's heart dropped. But he is so old. "I don't want to marry him," she cried, her eyes filling with tears. Dwoka frowned and shook his head. "You have no choice in this matter, Uloko. We have already agreed to the marriage. You will do as we say." Uloko felt trapped. She could hardly believe what was happening. How could her uncles force her to marry a man who was old enough to be her father? Desperate, she pleaded with them. "Please, Uncle Obika, Uncle Dwoka, don't make me do this. I want to go to school. I want to be a teacher. But her words fell on deaf ears. Enough. Obika snapped. You will marry Chief Okagbue, and that is final. That night, Uloko lay awake on her mat, tears streaming down her face. She felt like a bird caught in a cage, with no way out. The future seemed bleak, and her dreams of a better life were slipping further and further away. The days passed quickly, and soon the preparations for the wedding were in full swing. The women of the village began to weave a beautiful dress for Uloko, while the men prepared the food for the feast. Everyone was excited, except for Uloko. As the day of the wedding approached, Uloko's heart grew heavier. She tried to think of a way to escape, but the fear of being caught kept her from acting. She knew that if she ran away, her uncles would find her and force her back. On the morning of the wedding, Uloko stood in front of the mirror, dressed in her new gown. She barely recognized the girl staring back at her. The dress was beautiful, but it felt like a prison. Uloko, it's time, Dwaka called from outside. With a deep breath, Uloko forced herself to walk outside, where Chief Okagbue and the rest of the village were waiting. The ceremony began, but Uloko could hardly hear the words being spoken. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. As she stood next to Chief Okagbue, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see a kind face, one she had never seen before. It was a stranger, a traveler who had just arrived in the village. The stranger looked at Uloko with concern. Are you okay? He took her hand. I promise I will keep you safe, Uloko. You don't deserve this life. You deserve to be free. Taking a deep breath, Uloko nodded. Okay. Let's do it. As the moon rose high in the sky, Uloko and Uchendu quietly made their way out of the village. They moved swiftly, careful not to make any noise. The night was dark, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Uloko's heart raced as they approached the edge of the village. Every shadow seemed like a potential threat, every noise made her jump. But Uchendu was calm and steady, guiding her with a firm hand. Just as they were about to reach the forest, a dog barked loudly, shattering the silence. Uloko froze in fear, but Uchendu quickly pulled her into the shadows. We have to keep moving, he whispered urgently. If they find us, we won't stand a chance. With renewed determination, Uloko followed Uchendu into the dense forest. The trees towered above them, their branches blocking out the moonlight. The path was narrow and uneven, but Uchendu seemed to know exactly where to go. Oloko's heart pounded in her chest as they moved deeper into the forest, but Uchendu's presence gave her courage. She knew there was no turning back now. They walked for hours, the night air growing colder as they ventured further from the village. Uloko's feet ached, but she pushed through the pain, driven by the hope of freedom. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, Uchendu led Uloko to a small clearing. "We'll rest here for a while," Uchendu said, helping Uloko sit down on a large rock. "We've put enough distance between us and the village. They won't find us easily." Uloko nodded, too exhausted to speak. She looked around the clearing, noticing the beauty of the forest in the early morning light. Birds began to sing, and the leaves rustled gently in the breeze. For the first time in a long while, Uloko felt a sense of peace. "Thank you, Uchendu," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Uchendu smiled warmly. "You're strong, Uloko. You would have found a way. But I'm glad I could help." Meanwhile, back in the village, Uloko's absence was quickly noticed. When Obayako and Dwaka found her bed empty, they immediately knew something was wrong. Panic set in as they realized she had escaped. "She's gone!" Obika shouted, running out of the house. "She's run away!" Dwaka cursed under his breath. "We need to find her before Chief Okagbu finds out. If we don't bring her back, we'll lose everything." The two uncles gathered a group of villagers and set off into the forest, determined to track down Uloko. They knew the forest well and believed they could catch up to her quickly. As they moved through the dense underbrush, Obika's anger grew. "That ungrateful girl," he muttered. "We gave her food and shelter, and this is how she repays us." Dwaka nodded in agreement. "We'll bring her back, and she'll learn that she can't escape her fate." But as the hours passed, their confidence began to wane. The forest was vast, and Uloko had a significant head start. The villagers who had joined the search began to grow weary, and some even suggested turning back. "No," Obayako snapped. "We can't go back without her. Keep searching." Back in the clearing, Uloko and Uchendu rested for a short time before continuing their journey. Uchendu led Uloko through the forest, following a narrow path that eventually opened up to reveal a small, peaceful village surrounded by a river. "This is where we'll be safe," Uchendu said as they entered the village. "The people here are kind, and they will help us." Uloko looked around in awe. The village was simple but beautiful. Children played by the river, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers. It was nothing like the harsh life she had known with her uncle's daughter. As they walked through the village, a group of women approached them. One of them, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled warmly at Uloko. "Welcome, child. You look tired. Come, let us take care of you." Uloko felt tears welling up in her eyes as the women led her to a small house by the river. Inside, they offered her food and a place to rest. The warmth and kindness of the villagers touched Uloko's heart, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Over the next few days, Uloko began to settle into her new life in the village. Uchendu stayed by her side, guiding her and introducing her to the villagers. Slowly, Uloko started to trust him more and more. One afternoon, as they sat by the river, Uloko turned to Uchendu and asked, "Why did you help me? You didn't know me, but you risked so much to save me." Uchendu smiled gently. "I helped you because I saw a young girl who deserved a better life. I couldn't just stand by and watch you suffer." Uloko nodded, understanding. "But who are you, really? You've done so much for me, and I still don't know anything about you." Uchendu sighed and looked out at the water. "I suppose it's time I told you the truth. I haven't always lived in villages like this. I used to be someone important, but I had to leave that life behind. Uloko listened intently as Uchendu told her about his past, about how he had once been part of a powerful family but had to flee when danger came too close. His story was filled with sorrow and loss, but also with hope and determination. Uchendu told Uloko about his childhood in a distant kingdom, where he was born into a noble family. His father was a respected leader, and Uchendu was expected to follow in his footsteps. However, as he grew older, Uchendu realized that the life of a noble was not what he wanted. He longed for freedom and adventure, far from the responsibilities of his title. I loved my family, but I didn't want to live the life they had planned for me, Uchendu explained. So, I left the kingdom in search of a different path. I traveled from village to village, helping people wherever I could. That's how I ended up here. Uloko was amazed by Uchendu's story. She admired his bravery and his willingness to help others, even at great personal risk. You're very brave, Uchendu, she said softly. I don't know if I could have done what you did. Uchendu smiled and shook his head. You're braver than you think, Uloko. You escaped from a life that wasn't meant for you, and now you have the chance to build a new one. Uloko felt a sense of hope growing within her. Uchendu's words gave her strength, and she began to believe that she could create a better future for herself. With Uchendu's help, Uloko started to build a new life in the village. The villagers welcomed her with open arms, and soon she became part of their community. She helped with the daily chores, learned new skills, and even began to make friends. One day, as Uloko was helping to prepare food for a village feast, an older woman named Nana approached her. You have a strong spirit, Uloko, Nana said with a smile. I see a bright future ahead of you. Uloko blushed at the compliment. Thank you, Nana. I'm just trying to do my best. Nana nodded. And you're doing well. But remember, Uloko, you have the power to shape your own destiny. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Uloko thought about Nana's words as she walked. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was in control of her own future. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she was determined to make the most of the opportunities she had been given. Just as Uloko was beginning to feel secure in her new life, trouble was brewing in the background. Unbeknownst to her, her uncles had not given up their search. They were determined to find her and bring her back, no matter the cost. One evening, as Uloko was sitting by the river with Uchendu, she noticed a group of men approaching the village. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the familiar faces. It was her uncles, Obayako and Duaka, along with a few other villagers. Uloko, we have to go, Uchendu said urgently, grabbing her hand. They found us. Uloko's heart raced with fear. She had thought she was safe, but now her worst nightmare was coming true. What do we do? She whispered, her voice trembling. We'll face them together, Uchendu replied firmly. But we can't let them take you back. You deserve to be free. As the group of men entered the village, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered. The villagers looked on in confusion as Obayako and Duaka marched up to Uloko and Uchendu. There you are. Obayako shouted, his face red with anger. You thought you could run away, but we found you. Uloko backed away, fear gripping her heart. I won't go back, she said, her voice shaking but determined. I won't marry Chief Okagbu. Duaka stepped forward, his expression cold. You don't have a choice, Uloko. You belong to us, and you will do as we say. Uloko's uncles stood in front of her, their faces twisted with anger and determination. The villagers, sensing the tension, began to gather around, curious about what was happening. Uchendu stepped forward, placing himself between Uloko and her uncles. She doesn't belong to anyone, Uchendu said firmly. Uloko is free to make her own choices. Obiakwi sneered at Uchendu. And who are you to interfere? This is a family matter. She's coming back with us, whether she likes it or not. The villagers murmured among themselves, unsure of what to do. Oloko's heart pounded in her chest as she looked around, hoping for someone to stand up for her. Finally, Nana, the wise old woman of the village, stepped forward. "This girl has found a new home here," she said, her voice calm but strong. The village elders, who had been observing the confrontation silently, now stepped forward. They are a group of respected men and women, their faces lined with wisdom and age. Nana, the wise old woman, speaks first. She recounts Oloko's journey, her loss, and the hardships she endured with her uncles. Her voice is filled with empathy as she speaks of the courage it took for Oloko to escape an unwanted marriage and seek a better life. The head elder, a stern but fair man named Ezioka, listens intently. He then turns to Oloko's uncles, Obika and Duaka, and asks them to explain their actions. The uncles, now uncomfortable under the elder's scrutiny, stammer out a defense, claiming they were only looking out for Oloko's future by accepting Chief Okagbu's proposal. But their words sound hollow, even to themselves. Uchendu, standing beside Oloko, speaks next. He tells the elders how he found Oloko in distress, how she had dreams of education and a life beyond being someone's wife. His voice is firm and passionate, and the villagers nod in agreement, touched by his sincerity. Finally, Oloko is given the chance to speak. With tears in her eyes, she talks about her parents, the love they had for her, and how they would have wanted her to be happy. She speaks of her dream to go to school, to learn, and to help others. Her words are simple but powerful, touching the hearts of all who listen. The elders deliberate, speaking quietly among themselves. After a few moments, Ezioka raises his hand, and the village falls silent. "Oloko," he says, his voice strong, "you have shown great courage and wisdom beyond your years. You have the right to choose your own path in life. No one can take that from you." He then turns to Oloko's uncles. "You have failed in your duty to care for this child as her parents would have wanted. You allowed greed to cloud your judgment. For this, you must apologize to Oloko and make amends." Obika and Duaka, now humbled and ashamed, apologize to Oloko in front of the entire village. They promise to support her decision to stay in the new village and pursue her education. With the elders' verdict, Oloko feels a weight lift from her shoulders. The villagers cheer, and Uchendu smiles at her, his eyes filled with pride. Oloko's uncles, though regretful, nod in acceptance, realizing that Oloko's happiness is more important than their own ambitions.